Muscle tissue. All muscle tissue has the function of producing movement. There are three types. They are skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Skeletal muscle, of course, are the muscles that you are most familiar with. Your pecs, your biceps, your calves. These are the muscles that are attached to your skeleton. They move your skeleton to create locomotion, and they are called, therefore, skeletal muscle. They are composed of skeletal muscle tissue. Cardiac muscle is only found in the heart. They are not, I repeat, not found in blood vessels, only the heart. And lastly, smooth muscles are found around hollow organs. Well, what do I mean by hollow organs? Well, smooth muscle is involuntary, meaning that like cardiac muscle, you can't control it. So any part of your body that moves and you can't control, and it's not the heart, it's composed of smooth muscles, like your pupil. You can't control the size of your pupil. You can't control the size of your blood vessels. They dilate and they constrict. Your entire GI tract is not under your control, but yet it moves. It moves because of the action of smooth muscles. So, if it moves, it's not the heart and you can't control it, it's smooth muscle. So I mentioned that smooth muscle surrounds hollow organs. A hollow organ, for example, would be your small intestine. Your small intestine is basically a tube, and that tube is surrounded by layers of tissue, and the layer of tissue that allows it to move is this layer of smooth muscle. You would see the same situation in a blood vessel or your respiratory passages. Hollow lumen, as it's called, surrounded by various layers of tissue, and one of those layers would be smooth muscle, which allows it to move. Okay, so there are three types of muscle tissue, and you must identify all three. All of them have contractile proteins, which allow the muscle to contract or shorten. In skeletal muscle, here on the left, and cardiac muscle on the right, those contractile proteins are arranged in such a way that they give the tissue the striated appearance. Notice the banding pattern you see here in the skeletal muscle as well as the cardiac muscle. So if you see striations, you know, I'm definitely looking at muscle tissue, and then I know I'm either looking at skeletal muscle tissue or cardiac muscle tissue. How do you distinguish between the two? Well, cardiac muscle tissue contains what are called intercalated discs. They're a combination of desmosomes and gap junctions. And we learned about those intercellular junctions in chapter 3, the cell. Only cardiac muscle tissue has it, skeletal muscle tissue doesn't. So if you see intercalated discs along with striations, you know, aha, I'm looking at cardiac muscle tissue. If you see the striations with the absence of intercalated discs, you know you're looking at skeletal muscle tissue. The third type of tissue is smooth muscle tissue. It's called smooth muscle tissue because it does not have the banding patterns that skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle tissue have. It does contain contractile proteins, but they don't align themselves in a way that gives that banding pattern. So instead, the tissue looks smooth. What you'll notice with the smooth muscle tissue is it's composed of cells that tend to be sort of fat in the middle, and they taper toward the ends, and they have these flat, elongated, centrally located nuclei. Okay, let's put this to the test. Which type of muscle tissue is this? Well, you see the striations, you see the multiple nuclei, see these very long cells. Do you see any intercalated discs? No, you do not. So this is skeletal muscle. What about this tissue? You see the striations? Yes. Do you see intercalated discs? Yes, you do. Therefore, you know this is cardiac muscle tissue. And remember, you will not have to identify smooth muscle tissue. I'm not concerned that you might mix up smooth muscle with cardiac muscle or skeletal muscle, because the differences are obvious. Smooth muscle is not striated. However, smooth muscle is often confused with dense connective tissue. Often a similar reddish, pinkish stain is used. And in general, you have, sort of flattened longitudinal cells. However, if we look closely at these two different tissues, we do see some differences. One, dense connective tissue is more wavy due to the collagen fibers. Remember, dense connective tissue is like the body's rope, so think of lots of collagen fibers, whereas we don't see that pattern so much in smooth muscle. Also, the nuclei in dense connective tissue are much less conspicuous. You don't see them nearly as well. I mean, they're there, but they're very thin. In smooth muscle, they're definitely thicker. So spend a little time in lab making sure you can distinguish between smooth muscle and dense connective tissue. Because if you're going to mix two tissues up, it's going to be these two.